Mr. Mayor, members of council, fellow citizens, good evening. It can't be an easy undertaking to be in charge of municipal development in Black Diamond. On the one hand, there's a commitment to the Calgary Regional Partnership Plan regarding compact settlement, reducing the amount of land that accommodates new growth. On the other hand, our municipal development plan commits Black Diamond to sustaining green spaces, protecting natural areas, and maintaining a small town feel to the community. Facts are, it's beautiful here. People want to live here. The town will continue to grow. It's town council's responsibility to see that new development ticks a lot of boxes on the lists of should-haves, must-haves, would-like-to-haves. And your job is to weigh the advantages and disadvantages to Black Diamond. The proposed development in the Willow Ridge Riverwood area is an excellent test of meeting our small town values and the lifestyle we all cherish, and respecting our commitments to sustainable development and higher density. The Black Diamond Development Group is just some local folks who want to assist in the direction of residential development in Black Diamond. We want to see the town grow in ways that leave residents contented, proud. We're just simple citizens with opinions, trying to offer some of the feedback that you're looking for, letting you know, right or wrong, what thoughts are out there to help you in your decisions. Development Permit Application 17-30 is substantially the same as the plan approved 10 years ago. 3 apartment buildings and several villas. Since then, there have been huge changes in the area. The population has increased about 35%, and density has more than doubled. Well over 100 houses now occupy Willow Ridge and Riverwood, where native grass and stands of trees stood 10 years ago. Some of the area adjacent to the proposed development was formerly designated as green space. So about 2 acres right beside the 5-acre development that was green when the original plan was approved are no longer green. There have been changes in the economy, changes in government, and changes in how we go about our lives in this beautiful town. Things have changed over the past 10 years, but the development plan is substantially the same. The fact that a plan was approved in the past does not mean that it should be rubber stamped. Was a previous approving authority correct? Were they in error? Does the plan follow current laws? Some points for thought. Next slide, please. Many people believe the myth that increasing a tax base through new residential development lowers overall taxes. Every dollar that goes into the tax pot means less has to be paid by everyone, right? Your package includes a summary of 161 separate studies that show for every dollar raised in a new residential tax base, a mean of $1.16 and up to $2.27 has to be raised to keep everyone's services at the same level. Only 1 out of 161 studies showed a break-even point or better. Next slide, please. So, who pays when new residents bring in $1 and you need $2.27? Yes, you, me, us, the current residents. Residential development increases everyone else's residential taxes. I am certainly not saying don't build, but arguing that new residential development will increase the tax base and therefore lower our taxes is absolutely incorrect. Next slide, please. Next slide. The area adjacent to the development contains an escarpment. That's the area right in here. It's not this area here. That's just going to be dozed and leveled, and all of the topsoil is going to be removed and stocked until such time as the apartment buildings start. So the escarpment that I'm talking about is right along here. An escarpment is a steep slope that separates 2 relatively level areas of differing elevations. Our municipal development bylaw 01-14 states in part that all buildings or structures shall be sited at least 30 meters from the top or toe of an escarpment having a slope of 15% or more. So the slope doesn't even have to be very steep for it to be an escarpment. And 15%, that's just a little bit steeper than that wheelchair ramp outside. The area contiguous to the northwest portion of the development does contain an escarpment. This area also contains a wildlife corridor, native trees, butterflies, songbirds and their nests, fox dens, and a resident deer population. So, our bylaw 01-14 states, a municipal environmental impact statement is required to be submitted with all development applications adjacent to escarpments. Although required, I am told that one was not submitted. And another point regarding environmental concerns. Next slide, please. The shadow study presented by the developer at his open house appears to present the smallest average shadow that will be cast on this area at high noon by one of the proposed apartments. The apartment beside it either doesn't cast a shadow, or perhaps it was not included in the shadow study. So that small area shaded over the escarpment looks really tiny. Most of it will be in significantly more shadow for most of the time. As far back as I could readily find, the town has deemed the escarpment worthy of protection. Parts of this environmentally sensitive area that have never been in shadow will now be in shadow for a large part of the year. Some areas that have never been in shadow may now be in permanent shadow, and this alone will result in significant environmental change. This unique little oasis will be affected. The required environmental impact statement will tell us how badly it will be affected. I note that the Planning and Development Report, which is item 9.1 on your agenda, appears to ignore any environmental concerns. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The building site is right beside the hospital. And we heard a question and comments earlier regarding the soil in the entire area from someone who's a lot more qualified than I am to discuss it. But I will mention that for the hospital, full engineering and geotechnical studies were done. Everything was done by the book, but serious structural problems developed. Questions were raised in the legislature. Repairs cost the province $4 million in 1980s dollars, and part of the hospital couldn't be repaired and was demolished. So, what does hospital construction have to do with the development? Well, as I point out, one of the buildings is just a few meters away from one wing of the hospital. The development, as envisioned, will change rainfall and drainage patterns. Some soil against the hospital foundation will be drier and some wetter. Expansive clay will react accordingly. Vibrations from construction and adding tons of weight to areas that are susceptible to shifting ground can cause problems not just in the building under construction, but also in close-by buildings. The hospital stabilization needed some piles driven or drilled almost 20 feet into bedrock. Any chance vibrations from a pile driver or drilling just yards away will affect the hospital? An engineering study would perhaps give us some idea. I know that all legally required precautions will be taken to protect the hospital, and apartment building construction will proceed by the book with all the required outside expert opinions and assurances and all the appropriate boxes ticked, just like the hospital was constructed. Yes, the developer will give assurances and promises that any damage to the hospital will be repaired, at least the damage that he accepts that the work caused. And if he just walks away or is unable to fulfill his promises, as was pointed out in an earlier question, would we perhaps have to go to court for years in order to get damage repaired? In the late 80s and early 90s, the province was flush with cash, so repairs weren't a problem. Now, will the province bail us out? Could we lose part of the hospital? And the part of the hospital closest to the development and most likely to suffer any damage contains the hospital's sickest patients. Next slide, please. So we have to weigh risk versus reward. Building 3 apartment buildings next to the hospital may be a small risk. The reward to the developer, if things go as planned, is pretty high. The worst outcome, he loses some money. And the reward for the citizens that you represent, yes, there are some benefits. But can those benefits be gained by building somewhere further from the hospital with less risk or no risk to the hospital? And what are the consequences if that 1 in 1,000, 1 in 100,000 event happens? Do we lose part or all of our hospital? Mr. Mayor, members of council, no matter what opinions we receive from the experts, no matter what promises we receive from the developer, we do not believe the reward to our citizens is significant enough to balance any risk to the hospital. You can require changes to the plan. Anytime that you have any chance of losing something of value to an uncertain outcome, you are gambling. Please don't gamble with our hospital. Next slide, please. Next slide. In your package are portions of studies from scholarly sources, including one published in The Lancet, which is one of the premier medical journals. Some of the conclusions: many types of noise exposure pose a serious public health threat going far beyond hearing damage. Numerous studies pointed to associations between noise exposure and cardiovascular function, community annoyance, sleep disturbance, children's cognition, and, quote, even a patient's ability to heal in a hospital environment. Problem noises include things such as traffic noise, which will increase in the area. And in a hospital, even the beeping of monitors can be a problem. Now, most studies focus on noise created inside the hospital, but obviously, if noise from the outside can be heard in the hospital, it will have an effect. Is there absolutely any doubt in anyone's mind that hammering, sawing, movement of heavy equipment, and other noises and dust associated with construction will be heard in the acute care ward just a few yards away? Experts said the original single-story hospital plan required a few piles, but when the experts were wrong, the repair plans needed many more, all driven into bedrock. Will a 4-story apartment building in the same soil perhaps need a pile driver working right next to the hospital? And how about the dust permeating every nook and cranny of the hospital? When the plan was originally approved, this scientific study and many others that proves a patient's ability to heal is adversely affected by noise wouldn't be published for several more years. The information is available to us now. So, if you're in the hospital, your child, your grandchild, your healing will be affected by construction noise. So, can we do anything about it? Any noise barrier, even a 4-story one, may lessen the noise, but it won't eliminate it. But Bylaw 04-11 says a hospital zone is any portion of the town within 500 feet from the boundaries of the hospital site. So, much of the apartment building construction will be carried on in a hospital zone. And the same bylaw states that where an area is designated as being a hospital district, no person shall make or continue any noise or loud sound within the area. Not sounds that can be partially attenuated, no sounds. We have an obligation to protect our most frail and vulnerable citizens, our children, the sick, the elderly in the High Country Lodge. There is absolutely no way that apartment building can be built beside the hospital without making or continuing any noise or loud sound. Allowing construction noise associated with the building of a large apartment building in our hospital zone will have an adverse effect on the health of your citizens. I've given you academic articles that prove that noises much lower than construction noise will have an adverse effect on your ability to heal. And we haven't even mentioned the years of noise from the residents on the balconies of 4-story apartment buildings on a hot summer night. R4 zoning tells us that a 4-story apartment building must be permitted. Must be permitted, subject to confirmation that the development is able to meet not just the requirements of the number that was assigned 10 years ago, but all current federal, provincial and municipal laws. The development officer, developer, and all appropriate authorities must determine what the laws and bylaws are and then obey and enforce the laws. Next slide, please. We are not against development. If Black Diamond is to avoid stagnation and decline, then some development must occur. Yes, taxes will increase. There will be a cost to our environment and inconvenience to some of our citizens. There may even be cases where you decide the advantages to Black Diamond are high enough to knowingly, deliberately sacrifice the health of some of us, but only if the rewards to Black Diamond are high enough. Some development on the site may well be beneficial to the town, and if so, development should occur on that site, but not huge apartment buildings beside the hospital in a hospital zone. Next slide, please. Mr. Mayor, members of council, we do not envy your job. You have a delicate tightrope to walk. We came here this evening to discuss a development permit application. We hope to bring your attention to some of the thoughts that your neighbors have to help you as you walk that tightrope. Things have changed since the plan was first approved. We touched on 4 major points: tax effects, environmental concerns, concerns about the hospital, and the effects that the unavoidable noise would have on our most vulnerable citizens. There are many other issues that will no doubt be brought to you. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, you must want to know the possible effects on the escarpment, the wildlife corridor, the environment. Mr. Mayor, members of council, surely you don't want to accept any risk and gamble that we could lose any part of our hospital when a similar development could be built elsewhere. Mr. Mayor, members of council, now that we know the damage that even small noise levels can cause to our most vulnerable citizens, now that we know that making or continuing noise or loud sounds in a hospital zone violates our bylaws, something that your planning and development report does not address, surely you can't issue a permit that can only be completed by ignoring our municipal legislation. Next slide, please. I leave you with a quote from the Black Diamond Strategic Development Plan of 2011-2014. You can require revisions. Our bylaws permit, even require revisions in certain cases. Please protect the health of our vulnerable. Please review the permit application very carefully. Require a rewrite of the planning and development report to address the escarpment and the hospital zone noise. Make certain that the plan is in line with the current situation, in line with our bylaws, our values, and require amendment as necessary. Thank you.